The notification came at 7:14 in the morning, on the first day of what was supposed to be the rest of my life. I remember the exact time because I had been awake since 6, lying in the king-sized bed of our hotel suite at the Fairmont in Vancouver, watching the light change over the harbor. Brendan was still asleep beside me. His arm was thrown across his face the way it always was, his breathing slow and even. And I remember thinking, this is it. This is what the rest of my mornings look like. I had felt so full of something I couldn't even name. Gratitude, maybe. Or relief. The wedding the night before had been everything we'd planned for 2 years, and the whole thing had gone perfectly, right down to the string quartet playing as we walked out into the courtyard under the October sky. I picked up my phone to silence it before it woke him. The notification was from TD Bank. Not a text, an automated alert from the banking app we shared. We had set up a joint account 6 months earlier, just for wedding expenses. The alert said, "Large withdrawal detected. $4,200 CAD. Would you like to review this transaction?" I stared at it. My first thought was that it was a mistake. Fraud. Maybe. Someone had gotten into the account. I sat up slowly, trying not to shift the mattress too much, and opened the app. The withdrawal had been made 2 days before our wedding. Not from a shared account. From mine. My personal checking account, the one only I had access to. Except the transaction had been authorized through a linked transfer, approved with my credentials, sent to an account I didn't recognize. I sat there in the dark of that suite, in my hotel bathrobe, with the Vancouver harbor glittering outside the window, and I thought, I don't understand what I'm looking at. I almost woke him. I had my hand on his shoulder, my fingers barely touching the cotton of his t-shirt, and then I stopped. Something made me stop. I don't know what it was. Instinct, maybe, or just the particular quality of not knowing enough yet. I put my phone face down on the nightstand and went to the bathroom and stood under the shower for a long time with the water as hot as I could stand it. I should tell you about Brendan. We met at a work event, one of those corporate networking things where everyone is slightly uncomfortable and the wine is slightly too warm. He was there with a client, I was there with my manager, and we ended up standing next to each other at the same sad cheese board, making the same quiet joke about it. He was funny in an understated way, not showy. He didn't try to impress me, which, at that point in my life, was exactly what was impressive. I was 31 when we met. I had been working as a financial analyst at a mid-sized firm in downtown Toronto for 4 years, and I was good at my job, and I was careful with money because I had grown up watching my mother not be. I had an emergency fund, a TFSA, a small RRSP I'd been contributing to since I was 24. I don't say this to brag. I say it because it's relevant. Brendan worked in project management for a construction firm. He made decent money, nothing extraordinary. He rented a condo in Leslieville, drove a sensible car, didn't seem to have expensive habits. On paper, he was stable. In person, he was warm. He remembered things. Not in a performative way, but genuinely. I'd mentioned something in passing on a Tuesday, and he'd bring it up 2 weeks later, casually, like of course he remembered. On our 6th-month anniversary, he gave me a copy of a book I'd said once briefly that I'd always meant to read. He'd found a first edition of it at a used bookshop on Queen Street and had it wrapped in brown paper with a piece of twine. I remember holding it and thinking, this man actually pays attention. We dated for 14 months before he proposed. We were at his parents' place in Oakville for a Sunday dinner, and he did it in the backyard, quietly. Just the two of us before everyone came out. No photographer hidden in the bushes, no flash mob, no Instagram moment. Just him and me and the September light coming through the maple tree. And he asked, and I said yes. And then we went back inside and told his parents, and his mum cried in the happiest way. I had no doubts, not one. Not even the small, quiet kind that people sometimes admit to later. We got engaged in September and set the wedding for October of the following year. We booked the venue in Yorkville, hired a caterer my colleague recommended, and went about building a life together. He moved into my condo on Bloor West that spring. We opened the joint account for wedding expenses. Everything was organized, deliberate, shared. Everything felt like something I had chosen carefully and gotten right. After the shower, I got dressed quietly while Brendan's slept. I went down to the lobby and found a corner seat in the restaurant and ordered a coffee and opened my banking app again. The transfer had been sent to an account under the name of a numbered company. Not a person's name, a number. 1247836 Ontario Inc. I wrote it down on a paper napkin. I sat with my coffee going cold and thought very carefully. $4,200 was not a catastrophic amount. It wouldn't have cleaned me out, wouldn't have been something I'd have noticed immediately if I hadn't set up transaction alerts on all my accounts 2 years ago, out of professional habit. It was a number designed, maybe, to be just under the threshold of immediate alarm. That thought made something go quiet inside me. I'm not a person who panics. It's probably an occupational hazard. When your job is to look at numbers all day and find what doesn't fit, you learn to stay steady when things don't add up, because panic makes you miss things. So I didn't panic. I ordered a second coffee, and I thought about what I knew and what I didn't know, and I decided I was not going to say anything yet. Brendan came down about 40 minutes later, showered, smiling, looking like a man on the first day of his honeymoon, which he was. He kissed me on the top of the head and sat down across from me and ordered eggs, and we talked about nothing. About the wedding, about the speech his best friend Callum had given, about how good the salmon had been at dinner. I smiled when he smiled. I answered his questions, and underneath that, in some very quiet, very separate part of me, I was already starting to think. We were in Vancouver for 5 days. I had planned to spend them doing the things you do. Stanley Park, Granville Island, a day trip to Whistler. We did all of it. I took photos that looked exactly like what they were supposed to look like. Brendan was happy and affectionate and relaxed in the way he always was on vacation, and I watched him. Not obviously. Not like I was watching. Just with that particular alertness I couldn't turn off. On the second night, after he fell asleep, I got back on my phone. I looked up the numbered company. In Ontario, you can search incorporated businesses through public registry. 1247836 Ontario Inc. had been registered 14 months ago. The registered agent listed was a numbered address in Mississauga. The director of the company was listed as a holding entity. Another numbered company. I couldn't find a name. But I could find a registration date. The same month, Brendan and I got engaged. I don't know how long I sat there with that information. Long enough for my phone screen to go dark twice and for me to unlock it again both times. I called no one. I texted no one. I closed every app and put my phone in my bag and lay down in the dark beside my husband of 2 days and waited for morning. Back in Toronto, I had 9 days until I was back at work. I used them. I want to be clear, I didn't start from a place of certainty. I started from a place of a number that didn't make sense and a registration date that felt like a coincidence I couldn't afford to dismiss. That was it. I didn't assume the worst. I looked. A friend of mine from university, Rebecca, works in corporate law. I didn't explain everything. I told her I'd come across a numbered company in connection with something at work and asked if she knew how I could trace the beneficial ownership. She gave me a contact at a small due diligence firm. I emailed him on a Tuesday and had a call with him on Wednesday. It cost me $800 and 4 days. What he found, 1247836 Ontario Inc. was a shell. It had no employees, no declared revenue, no contracts on public record. The holding company listed as its director was itself directed by a single individual. And that individual, after 2 layers of incorporation, was Brendan. The firm contact sent me the documents in a password-protected PDF. I opened it at my kitchen table on a Thursday afternoon while Brendan was at work, and I read it very slowly, twice. Then I closed my laptop and sat there for a while. I thought about all the things that could explain this. I genuinely tried to think of them. Maybe he'd set up the company for a legitimate reason and hadn't told me because he was going to surprise me. Maybe it was an investment vehicle that had nothing to do with my money. Maybe the transfer was an error and the connection was coincidental. Except the transfer had come from my account, my personal account, which he had no direct access to, but which was linked to our joint account on the same banking app on a phone he occasionally used when his was charging. I remembered showing him the app months ago, walking him through it. I remembered him holding my phone. I went back and looked at every transaction in my personal account for the past year. There were 2 other transfers I hadn't noticed, one for $1,500 in June, one for $950 in August, both to the same numbered company, almost $7,000. Over 4 months. I didn't cry. I want to be honest about that. I don't know if that's something to be proud of or just a fact about how I'm made. What I felt was something colder and quieter than sadness. It was the feeling of a calculation being corrected. I thought very hard about what I wanted, not in a dramatic way, not what I wanted to say to him, or what I wanted him to admit, or what kind of confrontation I was entitled to. I mean, I thought practically. I thought about the joint account, the shared lease on the condo, the tax implications, the fact that we had only been married for 11 days and none of the legal administrative work of marriage was yet finalized. I thought about what I could document and what I couldn't yet prove. I transferred everything out of my personal accounts that weren't locked in registered savings. I did it methodically over 2 days, moving funds to an account at a different bank that was solely in my name. I emailed a family lawyer from my phone, not my laptop, to ask about an initial consultation. I saved copies of every bank document, every transfer record, every page of the due diligence report, to a cloud drive Brendan didn't know I had. I was calm. I kept being calm. I made dinners and watched television and answered questions about how I was settling back into things after the honeymoon. And I was fine, and I was already somewhere else entirely. 12 days after our wedding, I made a reservation at a restaurant. It's a place called Barrow on King Street West. We'd been there on our second date, years ago. I told Brendan I wanted to go back to celebrate being home, that I was feeling sentimental. He said that was sweet. He made no objection. He dressed nicely and drove us there and held the door. We were seated and we ordered drinks and we made small talk, and then I put my phone on the table with the banking documents open on the screen, and I said, "I need you to explain something to me." He looked at the screen. His face did something, a very small, very fast thing, and then he rearranged it. "What is this?" "It's a transfer from my account," I said. "To a company that you own." "I don't own a company, Brendan." I said his name in the way that means, I already know. "Don't. I have the corporate registry documents. I have the beneficial ownership trace. I have 3 transactions, June, August, and 2 days before the wedding. I've had 9 days to look at this very carefully, so I need you to decide whether you want to have an honest conversation or not, because those are the only 2 options." He was quiet for a long time. The restaurant was full and loud around us, and no one was paying us any attention. Which was fine, because I was paying complete attention to him. He said he could explain. And then, when I didn't say anything, he says it had been a mistake. And then, when I still didn't say anything, he said he'd been in financial trouble before we met, that he owed money to people he was trying to pay back quietly, that he hadn't wanted to tell me because he was embarrassed, that he was going to pay me back that he'd meant to tell me after the wedding when things settled down. I listened to all of it. When he finished, I said, "How much do you actually owe?" He said, "Around 40,000. I said, "And your plan was to take it from me quietly until you'd paid it off?" He looked at me across the table, and I could see him calculating. Not maliciously, I think, but reflexively, the way people do when they're trying to figure out what version of a story will land. I recognized it. I look at numbers for a living. "I was scared," he said. "I didn't know how to tell you. I understand that," I said, and I meant it. I did understand how someone could be afraid. "But I need you to understand that you didn't tell me, and then you married me. And then you took more money the week of our wedding. So whatever your fear was, it wasn't bigger than the decision to keep going." He started to say something about couples therapy, about how we could work through this, about how he loved me and that was real even if this other thing was wrong. I picked up my drink. I finished it. I set the glass down. "I've already spoken to a lawyer," I said. "I'm not asking you to leave the condo tonight, but I am asking you to understand that I'm going to be filing paperwork this week. I wanted to tell you in person, in a place where we both had to behave like adults, because I think you deserve that." He stared at me. "You can stay through the weekend," I said. "That gives you time to make arrangements." I won't tell you it was easy after that. It wasn't. There were conversations I hadn't expected. With his mother, who called me twice and didn't understand, and with our mutual friends who heard different versions of the story and had to decide what to do with them. There was the business of untangling a lease and a joint account, and 11 days of legal marriage, which is its own particular administrative tedium. There were also nights when I sat in my apartment. My apartment, the one I'd bought before him, the one I'd kept in my name, and felt the specific weight of a future that had to be rebuilt from scratch. Not from nothing, from scratch. Those are different things. Starting from nothing means you have nothing. Starting from scratch means you have yourself and your tools, and you just have to begin again. I had transferred enough to cover the retainer. I had documentation. I had colleagues who knew me professionally and a lawyer who was competent and a family who, once I explained, were steady and present without being dramatic about it. The financial piece was managed quickly, as these things go, because we had so little time legally entangled. The emotional piece took longer, as it always does. What I know now that I wish I had known then: financial deception in a relationship almost never starts big. It starts with something small that works, a charge that goes unquestioned, a withdrawal that doesn't register, one small test of what you're paying attention to. And then, if nothing happens, it grows. Not because the person is purely monstrous, sometimes because they're afraid, or ashamed, or because they've been lying to themselves as long as they've been lying to you, and they genuinely don't know how to stop. That doesn't make it acceptable. It makes it human, and also unacceptable. I think about the version of myself who didn't get that bank notification, who had her phone on silent that morning, who didn't have automatic transaction alerts turned on, who didn't have 14 months of professional habit, making her read documents twice and write things down. I think about how long it might have gone on. Brendan wasn't a monster. He was someone who got himself into a hole and chose, at every decision point, the option that asked less of himself in the moment. Chose it over and over again, including on the day he married me. I wished him well when we finalized everything. I meant that too. I'm in a different apartment now, still in Toronto, a bit further west, with a balcony I like and better light in the mornings. I have a TFSA that's recovered and then some. I have a job I'm still good at. I have a sister who came up from Hamilton for a week when things were hard and didn't try to tell me how I should feel about any of it, which was exactly right. I don't regret the wedding. That sounds strange, but it's true. I went into it genuinely, with everything I had, and I learned something about myself in the months after that I might not have learned any other way. I am not someone who breaks when things break. I am someone who, when the numbers stop adding up, starts looking very carefully at where the error actually is. And once I find it, I fix it. I always fix it.